start first and foremost the co-director of the Central and Southwest Asian Studies Center, Dr. Ardi Kia. Ardi, could you please stand up and be recognized? Also, as you saw today, we have had a wonderful turnout in our panel this afternoon, and much of it thanks to the quality of the presenters. My very dear colleague, Professor Michael Mayer of the History Department, Mike. Thank you. And my other colleague, Bob Seidenschwartz. This is the 20th annual conference on Central Southwest Asia, and we are coming to you in the midst of a major crisis in the Middle East, and we are truly honored to have with us a distinguished Israeli diplomat, the Consul General of Israel to the Pacific Northwest, Ambassador Marco Sarmaneta, who will be introduced momentarily. But I want to remind you that tomorrow the conference will continue with series of presentations, and we will culminate tomorrow night at 6 o'clock with a major presentation by former Governor of Montana, Governor Brian Schweitzer. So he will be with us tomorrow evening. I want to basically move very quickly. What we will have is we will have a presentation by the ambassador, and then we will then continue with a discussion from our friend Scott Osterman, Montana Director of Commerce, who has graciously joined us from Helena. Thank you very much for being with us, Scott. And then the discussion will open up, and we will be sitting here to answer any questions you may have after the ambassador has left us. So plenty of time for question and answer, and please use the microphone to come and ask your questions. Thank you very much. Chris, please.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kia. Before I introduce our guests, I also would like to recognize you, Dr. Kia, as the co-director of the program here and a co-host. I'm very honored that to be here together with the University of Montana and Dr. Kia and colleagues here. So some recognition to Dr. Kia as well, please. Thank you. I'm Chris Hislop. I'm the Executive Director of the Montana World Affairs Council. And as I said, very honored to be here as a co-host for this conference. The Montana World Affairs Council is a nonpartisan nonprofit, and our goal is to engage Montana communities and schools in the world and what's going on in the world and why it matters to us. And no better way to do that than to be part of a wonderful conference like this, celebrating its 20th year. Let me introduce our guests for tonight. The Montana Director of Commerce, Scott Osterman, is a visionary leader with a private sector background of guiding successful strategy and execution to realize growth, develop strong partnerships, and lead companies through transition. Scott is a North Central Montana native whose roots date back to an 1860s miner's cabin on Helena's Last Chance Gulch and to an 1880s homestead in the Missouri Breaks. Most recently, Scott served as Senior Director of Business Unit Operations at Applied Materials in Kalispell. Over the course of his 30-year career, he has served as a senior executive in Fortune 500 companies and venture startups in the semiconductor, automobile, and high-tech hardware and software industries. His broad experience in business includes strategic planning, rapid growth initiatives, operations, sales, market development, and turnaround execution. Scott is a graduate of the University of Montana, go Grizz, and continued his graduate studies at Washington State. Also joining us tonight is Ambassador Marco Sarmaneta. He is the Consul General of Israel to the Pacific Northwest, based in San Francisco. He is a career diplomat. Since 1993, he has a distinguished history of building partnerships and coalitions of support for Israel with the people and governments in the United States and around the world. Marco served as Israel's ambassador to Colombia and the Dominican Republic, Haiti, and Jamaica. He was the head of the European Multilateral Organizations Desk in the European Division of the Foreign Ministry, which included NATO, OSCE, and others. He also served at the United Nations and in Mumbai and Dublin. Born in Rome, Marco's family was active in the Roman Jewish community, who traced their origins to the Second Temple period 2,000 years ago. He immigrated to Israel as a child on the day before the Yom Kippur War. For him, being accepted as a cadet in the Israeli Foreign Ministry and representing Israel is a personal and professional dream. Besides international diplomacy, Marco has been writing and publishing poetry for the past 20 years. He also translates Italian and English poetry into Hebrew. He enjoys Italian cooking and music and is hoping to expand his vinyl record collection during his time in San Francisco and hopefully at a visit here sometime in the future to Missoula. Please welcome our panel. Oh, pardon me, before that, I also want to welcome Michael Meyer and Bob Seidenschwartz, who will also be joining the panel. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. As you may know, I was supposed to attend this conference, and I was definitely looking forward to a lively and inspiring exchange, but Israel's success story and its contribution to humanity. Instead, I find myself compelled to speak about recent events in my country, who unfortunately speak more of the inhumanity of Palestinian terrorism led by Hamas, an anti-Semitic Iranian proxy hell-bent on the destruction of Israel and whose sole purpose for being is to kill Jews. Since October 7th, Israel has been engaged in an unprovoked war, a war that we didn't want, but that we are determined to win. At approximately 6:30 a.m. that day, on the Holy Sabbath, the eighth and final day of the Jewish holiday of Sukkot, air raid sirens went off all across the country. And before the day was done, more than 3,000 rockets, missiles, and mortar shells were fired by Hamas as well as Palestinian Islamic Jihad from Gaza into Israel. As with all recent attacks, the barrages were fired from within densely populated civilian areas into densely populated civilian areas inside Israel, constituting a double war crime. Only this time, things were different because rocket fire was not the attack itself. It was primarily a diversion meant to provide cover for a Hamas invasion, slaughter, and kidnapping operation. Shortly after launching the intensive early morning rocket attack, Hamas units simultaneously rushed multiple military outposts on the Gaza-Israel border, killing or kidnapping virtually all the soldiers in them. At the same time, terrorists on motor power hang gliders, armed drones, and small speedboats entered Israeli territory, and the security fence was breached in a number of spots along the northern and eastern border between Gaza and Israel. Hundreds of armed terrorists on pickup trucks, motorbikes, and SUVs rushed across the border into adjacent Israeli kibbutzim, communities and towns, and several dozen others headed to the scene of a youth music festival where around 3,500 revelers were camped in tents and cars. This became the epicenter of a massacre. Some 260 bodies, overwhelmingly between the ages of 18 to 30, have been recovered from that site. Dozens more are still missing, presumed killed or kidnapped into Gaza. In a barbaric assault of unprecedented savagery, Hamas's terrorists went from home to home carrying out atrocities against innocent Israeli civilians. They slaughtered entire families in their beds, massacred hundreds of young people at the music festival, as I just described, kidnapped and raped scores of women, decapitated toddlers, and burned the elderly, including Holocaust survivors. The scenes that our security and rescue forces continue to discover in some of these places are of unfathomable cruelty and sheer evil. The stories and the images are simply unbearable, and the numbers are staggering. As of the morning of October 11th, today, over 1,200 Israelis are confirmed dead, the vast majority of them murdered and the rest killed in action, almost 3,000 wounded, hundreds critically, and somewhere between 100 and 150 kidnapped, including whose whole families with toddlers and senior citizens. Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad have also carried an unspecified number of corpses with them into Gaza. Just to give you an idea, 1,200 dead for Israel are like 42,000 dead in the US in one day. And we do not even have all the names of our fallen soldiers, our murdered innocent, to carry in our hearts. The funerals will probably go on for weeks. These, ladies and gentlemen, are not people. These are animals. Hamas is ISIS. And just as the forces of civilization united to defeat ISIS, they must support Israel to defeat Hamas. This is a fight between good and evil, between light and darkness. Hamas is responsible for what is considered the bloodiest day for Jews anywhere in the world since the Holocaust. And the responsibility for everything that follows falls squarely on their shoulders as well. They will soon understand that by attacking Israel, they have made a historic mistake. We may have paid a heavy price, and we may have a greater price to still pay. But the price they will pay will be unbearable, and it will be remembered by all of Israel's enemies for decades. Our resolve is unwavering, and we shall prevail. We simply have no other choice. Over the past days, we have received an overwhelming outpour of bipartisan support from elected officials of all levels, including from Montana. I take this opportunity to thank Governor Gianforte, Attorney General Knudsen, and the entire Montana congressional delegation who expressed unequivocal support to Israel in this dark hour. We have unfortunately seen in the streets of US cities and other places around the world vile attempts to defend the bloodthirstiness and evil of those who carry these pogroms indiscriminately of gender or age, any Jew that crossed that path. We did not want this war. It was forced upon us in the most brutal and savage way. As we fight this just battle, based on our right and obligation to defend our citizens and our territory, it should remain clear that this is not the time for ifs or buts. This is not a both sides situation. There was no both sides on 9/11 with Al-Qaeda. There was no both sides with ISIS. Moral clarity simply does not leave any space for both sides. Now is the time to stand with Israel as it faces a merciless, ruthless enemy. Because we're not only fighting for our own people, we are fighting for every country that stands against barbarism. Now is the time to stand united and show steadfast support as we take all necessary means to protect our population, our freedom, and our territory. The Jewish people are no longer defenseless nor stateless. I would ask you to also please not to look away. Share the stories of our innocent dead, our fallen heroes, and our captives. The IDF, in the meantime, and all other security agencies in Israel will continue to act with all their might and steadfast commitment to protect and eliminate this threat and pursue all those who perpetrate such grievous acts against us. The Israeli spirit will overcome. The battle may be long and it surely will be hard, but our people are united and resolved to prevail. We're determined to crush the Hamas war machine so that they cannot threaten us ever again. Together with you, our friends in the US, and together with our friends and allies all around the world, We will win.
Well, it's hard to listen to that and even conceive of what they're going through. But again, I'm Scott Osterman from the Department of Commerce here in the state of Montana. It's with a heavy heart that we're not able to meet with Consul General Sermonetta here. He's become a great supporter of ours and us for him. I can only say that even though it's 6,000 miles away where these things are taking place, we have families throughout our state, many of us with friends and others who are over there, and we can only say that we should support them, and as the governor has said, that we should stand with